Wouldn't it be nice to see improvement in every project that you did? Every time you sit down at your bench and work on a project, whether that's the tooling of it, the drawing, the construction, but to be able to see improvement. There's a reason why you're not seeing that. And I teach a lot of bull riding as well, and luckily I've learned that bull riding teaches us lessons for everything in life. So in bull riding, they call that a slump. Guys go get on and they're getting on over and over, just like you. You're going to the shop and building a project over and over, but they're not seeing any improvement. And the reason comes down to something that's inside of you inherently by nature. Most crafters are our own worst critics, right? Is that you? Can you look at a project and point out every single flaw that you made in there, every mistake, every line that wasn't quite where you wanted it at, every stitch out of place, every edge that wasn't finished quite right? My guess is you can point those out. And my other guess is it's the first thing you point out. So that thing inside that makes you want to be your own worst critic isn't necessarily bad. Okay, it's good to see what we're doing wrong. However, if you're gonna point out what you're doing wrong, that's the easy part. Anybody can go pick on themselves. But even more important than that is you have to be man enough or woman enough to give yourself credit for the work that you've done, the thing that you have improved on, right? And when we first go to the mistakes and just really pound on ourselves for not getting that perfect, that changes your whole frame of mind. And when you're pointing out the negative and seeing the negative, you're going to be producing the negative. So bull riders, when they get done with a ride and working with a lot of these kids, that same thing, they're wanting to get better, they want to go be a world champion, and they get bucked off and they're mad, and all they can see is I fell off, I got bucked off, I got my arm way behind me, all these different mistakes that they can make. And I tell them something, I'm going to tell you the same thing. There's 3 questions that you need to ask. Every time they hit the ground, every time they get done with a ride, I tell them there's 3 questions. And the order in which you ask them is very, very important. So how does this apply to leatherwork? How does this apply in your shop? Is every project you get done with, you're going to have these 3 same questions. So the number 1 question is, what went right? What did I do good on this? Some days that's hard. Sometimes bull riders, they think everything's going good and they nod their head, and next thing they know, they're picking themselves up out of the ground. And it can be hard to pick out what went right. And I tell them, back up as far as we need to. Well, how was your shoot procedure? How'd you do getting down on there, getting your hand tied in? Did you do that right? Did you do that good? Some days it feels like, no, I couldn't even do that right. Well, let's back up. Did you get your spurs on today? Did you remember to do that? Did you remember to put your boots on the right feet today? Like, go back as far as you have to give yourself credit for what you did right. And in the leather shop, that's going to be the same thing. Back it all the way back up. What did you do right on this project? What did you feel like you really got this dialed in? Maybe that's, hey, I managed to transfer my pattern to my leather and that seemed to go all right. I cased my leather right. I got the right moisture content in there. Maybe you have to go back and say, hey, I tooled on the right piece of leather. I used veg tan, not chrome tan. Well, that was a good start. That was good today. I did get the right leather. Doesn't matter how far back you have to go. The first question that you ask is, what went right? What did I like that I did on this project? The reason we do that is because it shifts your brain and it sets things in a new perspective. If we instantly go to the negative, what I did wrong, it puts you in a negative frame of mind, which holds you back from improvement. If you give yourself that credit. I did this right. Okay, good. I'm not a failure. I'm not somebody who can't do this at all. I did this part of it right. That's good. If I can do this part right, there's hope that I can do the next part right. Because there was a point in time where you didn't know to tool on veg tan leather versus chrome tan leather. You didn't even know you had to get your leather wet to tool it at one point in time. So if you can learn that, and if you can master that, then there's a chance and a hope that you can master the next thing. So it shifts that brain. And I see it in bull riders. I'll go to one, comes down, hits the ground. We just got done doing a school this last week. So I'm right there in the arena and talking to him right afterwards. And I had this one kid, and this is just a great example. And I'll say his name was Trenton. I went up to Trenton afterwards, and he had hit the ground, and he was just, first thing I come to him on the fence and just head down and disappointed. And he's like, hey, look at me. So what went right? Well, nothing. Well, something had to go right today. How were those first couple jumps? How did those feel? Well, pretty good. It's like, okay, were you driving to that front end right out of there? Yeah, I did that. Okay. Did you sit up and meet that kick and set your hips in there, those first two jumps? Yeah, that felt pretty good. Okay, and notice he stood up there was a physical change in him when he started answering these questions, and I made him look back and see what went right. Now, it didn't change the outcome. It didn't change that he was bucked off. It didn't change that there were some mistakes there. But by recognizing and giving himself credit for the things he did right, how little they were, those couple little things, but by doing that, it changed his sense of pride and picked him up. Literally, it physically picked his body up, and he started standing a little taller. Said, okay, good. We give ourselves credit. Now it's question number 2. What's the second thing we got to ask is what went wrong? What did I not like about this project? I asked Trenton, what went wrong? Well, I got bucked off into my hand. He turned that way and I bucked off into my hand. Okay, that went wrong. You're absolutely right. In leatherwork, what's that thing that went wrong? What did I not like? The first thing, we can't have a big list. And that's what I told him too, is you can't give me everything. What's the first thing that went wrong? Right? The last thing he said, well, I got bucked off, I hit the ground over here. But as I lost my feet, I got tipped into my hand. I got my arm behind me. All these things that he could stack up. But then we back up, well, what's the first mistake? What's the first one that caused everything else? Well, first, he didn't get to the front. He hesitated to jump, kept that arm behind him, got his free arm behind him, and this causes rotate your shoulders out, rotate your hips, your weight's on one leg, you get dumped off on your head. There's a chain reaction, right? But the first thing was right here. That free arm got back. So in leatherwork, what's the first thing? Because we don't want to start, well, my finish was bad on it, my decorative cuts, they suck, they were kind of choppy, and my bevel lines didn't look very good because that was kind of crooked here. Was that first cut, did you actually cut that pattern in smooth? Well, no, that line got a little choppy and wavy right there. Okay, those are harder to bevel then, aren't they? Well, yeah, that does make it harder to bevel. So you actually did a pretty good job beveling the line that you had to bevel. If those aren't good, it's hard to run that shading and know right where to run your shading to. So there's other things that can stack on, and you can point out all the little ones. But what's the first one? Pick one thing, okay? And then we have to stop asking that question, because now it's time to go on to question 3. Question 3 is, what can I do better on the next thing? What's one thing I can do better to improve? So Trenton, we didn't worry about the feet and the hips and all that. So one thing I can think about has to do with that first thing that went wrong. He needs to drive that elbow forward. Perfect. We give ourselves credit for what went right. We made ourselves realize this is something I can do. If I can learn this part, I can learn the next part. It's possible. I did that. I did make some mistakes. This is the first mistake that I made. I will say I made a mistake. There's something we could do better on this. Now, not just how or what can we do better, but now how can we do better? What's that one thing we can focus on the next time around? And then on the bull rider side, they got to forget that ride, go on to the next with just that frame of mind, looking at the next thing that they're going to work on to get a different outcome. Leather side, the same thing. We've looked at what you did right. We've picked out that one mistake we want to improve, looked at how we're going to improve that. That cut wasn't very smooth. You know what? I'm going to make sure that moisture content's good in there so I can get a good clean cut in there. Strop that knife so it's running smooth. And then I'm going to set myself up and get positioned to where I can pull those long, smooth cuts better. That's what I'm going to focus on. I'm going to focus on my positioning when I make my cuts. So the next project, we're going to slow down. I'm going to really think. I'm going to set my positioning for those cuts. And then we'll go on and do the rest of the project. But by focusing on that one thing, now we can look to see what that does to our project, evaluate after that one, then we can look for the next thing to improve on. We can't focus on 27 things at once. It's hard to do. Give yourself one thing to focus on, because then when we reflect on the next one, we can hopefully give some credit for that too, right? Well, what did I do right on this? Boy, those cuts got a little smoother. I like that. My cuts got smoother. But you're never going to see that positive thing if you're not looking for it. And if by nature we're our own worst critic and we're got to be a perfectionist and I want it to be perfect and I want it to be excellent, I want it to be as good as this guy over here or that gal over there, they've been doing it for 20, 30 years, whatever. They've been at it longer. They've gone through these hard times. So if you're still at that point of looking that you need to have that improvement, you're wanting to see that improvement and you're not seeing it, we better slow down and start looking for it. We can't just expect to improve and not look for it. If you're looking for the negative, you're going to find the negative. But if we look for positive, give yourself credit on that, then take note on what we can improve and pick one thing for that next project, I promise you, you will start seeing improvement in your leather work. You can be your own worst critic, but you better be your own cheerleader as well. It takes both sides of it. Anybody can get down on themselves for doing something wrong, but it takes a minute to step back and get a different perspective and give yourself credit for the part that went right too. So I hope you take this into your leather shop, on the next project, into your next business deal, into your next social media post, whatever it is you're doing, give yourself credit. Remember, 3 questions. What went right? What went wrong? What can I do, one thing, on the next one to improve it? Thanks for letting me be a part of your journey. Look forward to seeing you on the next video.